Welcome to the Ghost Show online, my fiends, booze, and ghouls. Your hosts, Seika Groves, Rachel Benter, and Ian Russell will discuss all things paranormal. Prepare to be afraid.
Hellfire Club. I'll let you lead. You tell me, and then I'll tell you.
I want to talk about a location related to the Hellfire Club, not necessarily about the club itself.
Right, okay.
And this location is called Montpelier Hill,
known
as Mount Pellier Hill.
Right.
And there is an old stone building that is constructed on this site. It was a hunting lodge built in 1725 by William Connolly, who was the Speaker of the Irish House of Commons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this lodge was built right on top of the hill, and immediately you automatically go to haunted occurrences, because this hill was originally a prehistoric monument.
Right, yes, it was a mound.
Mm-hmm. And this lodge was built from material that was taken from the graves and this monument to construct the lodge. So right away, there's something that's going to create tremendous paranormal activity. So the Hellfire Club, they were the Irish Hellfire Club, not to be confused with the British Hellfire Club. That was a separate entity.
Yes.
They were founded in 1737, and they rented out this William Connolly hunting lodge as the location where they held their, quote, meetings, which were very dark, very, very ritualistic, according to the stories that have come out. A lot of what they say, dark rituals, satanic rituals.
Sacrificing virgin rituals.
Yeah. They had a black cat, which was their mascot, which I understand, at least in folklore, was sacrificed along the way, along with everything else. And it's like, oh my God, this club was just something else.
It was an interesting sort of removal from the church.
Well, to say the least,
nicely, yes, to say it, with some poetic etiquette. It was intentionally created to be something very far from the Christian church, and it indeed appeared to be very far in its ideals and its sort of practices from the Christian church. So. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they ran their, quote, meetings within this stone lodge building, and somewhere along the way, in their crazy antics, they set fire to the roof, and and burned like the roof off, and they had to evacuate the building because Connolly had to repair the roof, and they ended up in somewhere on that property, a building known as the Steward's House.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Which was in
They took
Killikee.
over another building that was on the property. Mm-hmm.
And Killikee and the steward's house. I don't know what happened with the Hellfire Club then moving into there, but it appears they brought their ghostly cat with them, because even today there are stories of this ghost cat that is haunting what is known as the steward's house.
Right. Well, it's an interesting thing too, right? Because the Hellfire Club, there was a number of Hellfire Clubs in and around the sort of late 18th century. Each one of them had its own sort of, existence, right? They weren't really joined together. I think what it was the name was just something that appealed to a certain niche of people at the time. And let's just be very forward here. It was men. Because women were not allowed in the Hellfire congregation, so to speak. The only women were these women that were considered sacrificial maidens. And
yep, exactly.
That's alluding to the fact that in the beginning, they weren't actually sacrificing them. They were taking their virginity. Mm-hmm. So, so rounding up young women who, they could essentially violate and take their virginity somehow made them feel like they were powerful men at the time. And the other thing is that later on, there could even have been some literal sacrifices of young women. So it's an interesting foray into what Hollywood has certainly picked up and ran with for many years after the fact. Did these people call themselves Satanists? No, they didn't actually. They didn't really see themselves as such, which is what Hollywood likes to depict this sort of, the concepts of the Hellfire Club. Let's talk a little bit about the building itself. I mean, there's a number of different locations for the Hellfire Club, and a number of different, as you said, there was a Hellfire Club in England. There's also a Hellfire Club in Paris. So each one of them, I suspect, was similar in its overall ideas, but a lot of it seems to be that the most sort of sinister, and I guess maybe, and this could be a prejudice too, right? Because this is coming from the British viewpoint against the Irish, right? So I kind of always take that with a grain of salt, because there's an awful lot of prejudice that could be thrown into that. But the Hellfire Club itself in Dublin was considered to be the most notorious of all of the Hellfire Clubs. And the group's wild excesses sort of came under the attention of Jonathan Swift, who was a Christian. He railed against the Hellfire Club and described them as the following. This is what he says. He goes, "A brace of monsters, blasphemers, and bacchanalians, of whom Worsdale was the leader." So he wasn't really, I guess, up on the whole bacchanalia idea of, wild sex and drinking and all of these things. But what it does say is there was a lot of heavy drinking. It sometimes, sexual assaults were happening indeed. And on occasion, at least one recorded occasion, there was a murder of a young so-called virginous woman. So it's, by the one side, they say that there was satanic rituals going on, and that the members of the Hellfire Club were in a pact with the devil. And then there's the other side that says, no, we weren't. We just weren't part of Christianity. we didn't believe in Christianity. So without getting into the beliefs and all of the, because there's just, at this point in time, I think it's a murky quagmire of he said, depending on who it is that's saying it. But at the end of the day, the location itself, I think, is really the interesting spot, because it's actually originally the meeting place for the Hellfire Club was said to be at a place called the Eagle Tavern, and that was on Cork Hill in Dublin. And the tavern and the proprietor, Mr. Lee, were both, of a certain quality and yet very discreet. So they decided, though, that because they were in Dublin, it was a lot easier in the city of Dublin, let's just say in the core. It was a lot easier for people to sort of spy on them and get information and, figure out what, devilish things they were doing at the Hellfire Club.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So they decided to kind of amalgamate, if you want to say, or rendezvous with other elite organizations like the Aughrim and the Hanover Club and also the Freemasons. So it says that, and I'm just going to read this because it's an interesting piece and I don't think that I can better sort of relay it in less words. It says, a night out along Cork Hill in the 1730s must have been lively and somewhat dangerous, as a number of competing groups, such as the Hellfire Club and the Blasters, haunted the area. They no doubt were attracted by a quantity of social establishments, and a survey of Dublin's 18th century shop signs lists no fewer than 6 taverns in close proximity to the Hellfire Club's favorite meeting place, which at that time was Eagle Tavern. Others included the Cock and Punch Bowl, the Globe, the Hoop, Jacob's Ladder, and 3 Cranes. There's also a number of coffee houses that were frequented in the 18th century by dissolute dilettantes, especially Luca's Coffee House, that's mentioned in a number of accounts. And that was directly across from the Eagle Tavern. There was Solomon's Coffee House and St. Lawrence's Coffee House. And it says there's no doubt whether the Irish Hellfire Club met regularly, but it is said that they met at the hunting lodge on Montpelier Hill, which is what you were just describing. And William Domville Hancock wrote in 1899, the tradition that the Hellfire Club held some of their meetings here may have been founded on fact. That mysterious and iniquitous assembly existed about the time that the house was built, and a member of the club lived not far off. So we have some actual, I guess, legitimate reference to them using that location indeed as the Hellfire Club meeting place, outside of all of these coffee shops and pubs that they were also meeting in. So I think that there's probably a pretty good indication that the Conley family, who were actually leasing the hunting lodge at the time of the Hellfire Club's existence there, can be proven, I suppose, by some of these. There's also a rental agreement that still stands today. It was discovered in the Castletown Papers, the Connolly Archive, housed in the Irish Architectural Archive, that says the first Earl of Rossi, housed in Birr Castle, along with Connolly, and the highest potential for discovering at the time of writing was that they did indeed use this location as a meeting place for the Hellfire Club. So, with that being said, can we say the Hellfire Club is haunted? Well, I think it's probably haunted beyond a cat.
Well, as I say, I think it's the land, because they built this hunting lodge. Well, they didn't build it, but Conley.
Conley built the
yeah.
The
It's sitting on a prehistoric monument and graves. They built the lodge out of stones that he grabbed from the location to build. So it's To
I
me,
mean,
it
yeah,
just
they
it just
essentially,
screams paranormal.
I'm intrigued by it just because it really talks to the dark side of human nature,
It does, yeah.
the things that go on there. And I'm just an odd person like that. I'm very drawn to the dark side of human nature. Hence why all of my Victorian stuff is, the macabre and the dark side of human nature. But I think that that's the fascinating thing, is to figure out why we're drawn to that. What is it that makes that appealing to certain people, but not so appealing to other people? And so I think that, something like the Hellfire Club, or, even like Golden Dawn, all of these secret societies have, some sort of intrigue or interest. And I honestly don't think they were really open to the everyday person either.
No, probably not. As I say, a lot of what I've heard is that it was made up of a bulk of very well-known,
Mm-hmm.
wealthy
And people with
individuals.
money, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, how could you possibly keep these kinds of secrets and these kinds of things that give you the privacy that you need, or perhaps paying that tavern owner just a little extra money to use the back room, or to keep quiet about the meetings or what you might have heard. So yes, it's definitely interesting. That location also too apparently has the original owner is said to still be on that site as well. So Connolly, who came later, but the original owner, as you had mentioned, the person who had purchased the land and had built the mound and those types of things prior to Connolly's hunting lodge, the original site. Yeah, that would be being interesting. He's said to still kind of roam around there as well. So that would be kind of an interesting thing. There's just so many interesting places in Ireland to talk about. I mean,
well, there's another building that's actually kind of related, and I'll just say it loosely,
okay,
because it's related just through stories and folklore. But one of the stories with the Hellfire Club at the lodge there, there's this crazy story, and I don't believe a word of it, that there was some kind of satanic, demonic presence that showed up. A man with hooves for feet, and created havoc and all that. And there's a connection, though. That same story also appears in another building. And here's where I'm going to draw a blank.
Yeah, I do all research, and then I'm like, okay, if I don't write it down, I'm done.
Loftus Hall.
Oh, okay.
It was called Loftus Hall. It's a big old stone mansion somewhere there in Ireland. And they share the same story, that there was this demonic presence that showed up with cloven hooves for feet. And actually, the building was just put up for sale last summer.
Darn, and I didn't have a lottery winning to buy it.
$3 million. If you got an extra $3 million, I don't know whether it's still up for sale or whether it was sold.
Wow.
But yeah, so they share the same story. And as I say, I don't believe a word of that. That's just folklore and stories. But
and the interesting thing
joins together with the whole Hellfire Club.
The Hellfire Club, right? The idea of the demon and the demonic, and I mean, even my father's book, The Ballerbane, has a somewhat cloven hoof creature that comes from folklore in Devon. And so it certainly makes its way around the British Isles and Ireland and different places. And I wonder too if it's in reference to being satanic, or if it's one of those things that who first referred it, right? Because I'm always sort of skeptical of these stories because it's almost always pushed forward by the Christian church. Right? I hate to say it, but it's so true. You know, they are so,
and again, but the stories are also so old that in addition to what you just said, you've got the time period where more quote information just keeps getting added to it until you've just got this completely ridiculous tale that there's no possible way that this ever occurred.
No. It's broken telephone in history, right? So you
know, it's like the guy that went out fishing and he caught a fish this big. Well, by the time the story gets told, he's got this 17-foot-long shark on the end of his fishing rod. That ate his boat. And
he caught it in the stream behind the house. And that's just it, right? It's kind of like, as I call it, historical broken telephone. It doesn't mean that it's historical in accurate sense of, historical happenings, but it's just throughout history, the story has changed and shaped and molded and become something much more than it really is. Oh, I'm just looking at a picture of Loftus Hall right now. Wow, it's huge.
It is. Yeah.
So I'm just going to read this little blurb about it. It says, Loftus Hall is in the county Wexford. It's home to not one, but two spectres, calling itself the most haunted house in Ireland. So, Ian, it has two spectres, and that's the most haunted house.
Well, I don't know about that.
I know. I'm thinking, I know locations that have far more than two.
Much more than that. Yeah.
Maybe they're two legitimately referenced specters, that have been perhaps caught on camera or, caught in a sound clip. But it said this abandoned building is said to have been haunted by both the devil himself, as you said, and a young woman who once lived in the house, rumored to have been briefly owned by Bono from U2.
Really?
In brackets, if that's not horrific enough.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Apparently Bono owned the house. It's accompanied by a legend that a mysterious visitor welcomed into the house one night after a storm was later revealed to be the devil by the presence of its cloven foot. It was either that or Krampus. After his disappearance through the roof, the young lady of the house was driven mad and died years later in a room to which she was confined. So there's the combination of that story right there. And who knew that Bono owned it? So why did Bono sell Loftus Hall?
He was scared out in the middle of the night, probably.
Bono, is it haunted?
Who knows?
Can we ask Bono if it's haunted? Yeah, I might have to send him a message on Facebook and go,
why did you sell your house?
Was Loftus Hall haunted? When did Bono own it? I am not sure. It does not say. But we'll have to look into it. It says rumored to have once briefly been owned by him. So that may have been back in the 80s. Who knows, right? But apparently he sold it fairly quickly from the sounds of it. So.
Thank you for watching The Ghost Show Online. Join your hosts again next week as they discuss more tales of the supernatural, the paranormal, and all things spectacular. See you soon.